America's national parks don't stop taking victims. People disappear inside them. People die inside them. Not during storms, not in chaos, but in broad daylight, on marked trails, near others, sometimes while doing everything right. 5 disappearances that never made sense at the time. Cases that shattered every assumption about safety inside these parks. This may be the most disturbing video we've ever made about national park disappearances. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never see America's national parks the same way again. The ranger who never came back. When people disappear inside national parks, there is usually an assumption. They were visitors, they were unfamiliar, they made a mistake. Paul Braxton Fugate breaks that pattern completely. Fugate was 41 years old, a National Park Service ranger, a man whose job was to patrol, protect and understand the land inside Chiricahua National Monument, a remote, rugged landscape in southeastern Arizona, known for its towering rock formations and narrow canyons. This was not a place he was learning. It was a place he already knew. On January 13, 1980, Fugate was working a normal shift at the monument's visitor center. There was nothing unusual about the day. No reported threats, no severe weather, no emergency calls. At approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Fugate stepped out of the building to go for a hike inside the park. He never returned. When he left the visitor center, Fugate was wearing his full National Park Service uniform, green and gray. The official arrowhead patch was visible on his sleeve. A gold ranger badge was pinned directly over his heart. He was not blending in. He was not anonymous. If anyone saw him, they would have known exactly who he was. When Fugate failed to come back, concern escalated quickly. Search teams were deployed across the monument. Rangers, law enforcement, and volunteers combed trails, canyons, rock corridors, and areas Fugate was known to frequent. Helicopters scanned from above. Ground teams worked through terrain designed to confuse direction and swallow sound. Nothing was found. No clothing, no badge, no equipment, no sign of a fall or an accident. From the very beginning, investigators suspected foul play. That detail matters because park rangers do not simply disappear during a routine hike, especially not without leaving a single item behind. Fugate knew the terrain, he knew the risks, and he knew how to communicate if something went wrong. Yet there was no radio call, no distress signal, no confirmed final sighting beyond the moment he walked out the door. As months turned into years, the case went cold, but it never closed. In the years following Fugate's disappearance, the National Park Service offered a reward of up to $20,000 for information. Tips came in, leads were followed, none held. Then, decades later, something changed. Nearly 40 years after Paul Fugate vanished, investigators announced renewed interest in the case. New information, never fully disclosed to the public, prompted the National Park Service and the Cochise County Sheriff's Office to re-examine old evidence and reissue a public call for help. The reward was increased to $60,000. That escalation speaks volumes. Rewards of that size are not offered for accidents. They are offered when investigators believe someone knows something and has chosen not to speak. Chiricahua National Monument is not vast like Yosemite or the Grand Canyon. It is rugged, yes, but finite. And yet, a uniformed ranger disappeared there in the middle of the afternoon without a trace. No witnesses reported a struggle. No remains have ever been recovered. No official explanation has been confirmed. Paul Braxton Fugate is still missing. The case remains open. And somewhere within those rock corridors, whether hidden by time, terrain, or silence, is an answer that has waited more than 4 decades to surface. Because when even the guardians of the land can vanish, the mystery isn't how dangerous these places are. It's how completely they can erase someone who knew them best. The girl who stepped off the trail. At higher elevations in Yosemite, danger does not announce itself. There are no warning sounds, no sudden drops you can see from a distance, just open granite, scattered trees, and the illusion that nothing can go wrong. That illusion broke on July 17, 1981. Stacey Arras was 14 years old, a white female, approximately 1 meter 65 centimeters tall, weighing around 54 kilograms. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, naturally straight. On that afternoon, she wore a white windbreaker, a white knit blouse with a square neckline and lace detailing, vertically striped shorts in burgundy, and white with thin sky blue accents, grey hiking boots with Vibram soles, a gold anklet, and braces on her upper teeth. She was traveling with her father as part of a group of 10 people on a 4-day trip along the High Sierra Loop. Beginning in Tuolumne Meadows, they arrived at Sunrise High Sierra Camp around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, transported by mule. The setting was calm, familiar, controlled. After settling into the cabin and taking a shower, Stacey decided to take a short walk, approximately 2.4 kilometers, along the trail leading toward the Sunrise Lakes. She was not supposed to be alone. She planned to walk with a 77-year-old man from the group, but early into the hike he became tired and sat down to rest. Stacey continued ahead, unhurried, unbothered, staying within view of the trail. At some point she stepped off it. The guide who had led the mule party to Sunrise was working at the corral when he noticed her. Stacey was standing on a rock approximately 50 meters south of the trail. She wasn't running. She wasn't signaling. She wasn't calling for help. She was just standing there. That guide was the last known person to see Stacey Ann Arras alive. When she did not return to camp, concerns spread rapidly. Rangers were alerted. Search operations began almost immediately, focusing on the area around Sunrise Camp, the trail to Sunrise Lakes, and the surrounding alpine terrain. This was not dense forest. This was not a canyon. This was open country. Searchers scanned granite slabs, tree lines, shallow depressions, and slopes where footing subtly gives way. Helicopters flew overhead. Ground teams swept in widening circles. Nothing was found. No clothing, no boots, no jewelry, no indication of a fall. What unsettles investigators is how ordinary the moment was. She didn't panic, she didn't run, she didn't disappear suddenly. She simply stepped a short distance away from a marked trail, within sight of others, and was gone. The landscape around Sunrise is deceptive. Rolling granite and sparse forest create blind spots where a person can vanish without leaving evidence. Sound behaves unpredictably. A voice does not always travel where it should. Despite extensive searches, Stacey Arras was never found. No remains, no belongings, no confirmed explanation. Yosemite did not take her during a storm. It did not take her at night. It did not take her far from help. It took her in the middle of the afternoon, while people were watching. In Yosemite, danger does not always chase you. Sometimes it waits for one quiet step off the path, and when that step is taken, the land closes behind you without a sound. The man who faded into Tiltill Valley. Tiltill Valley does not feel dangerous. There are no cliffs that demand attention, no roaring rivers cutting across the trail, just long meadows, soft forest edges, and a quiet that settles gradually until it becomes total. That is where Michael Fiser disappeared. Fiser was 51 years old, a white male approximately 1 meter 78 centimeters tall, weighing around 75 kilograms. He had shoulder-length grey hair, a grey beard, and wore glasses. On the day he vanished, he was dressed simply, a faded blue or blue-grey t-shirt, olive or khaki shorts, and a red or faded pink scarf around his neck. Nothing about his clothing suggested urgency. Nothing suggested danger. On June 21, 2005, Fiser was reported to be hiking alone in the Tiltill Valley area of Yosemite National Park, northeast of the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. It was not a holiday rush. It was not extreme weather season. Conditions were stable, visibility was clear, and then he was gone. When Fiser failed to return, search efforts were launched across Tiltill Valley and the surrounding terrain, an area known for its subtle disorientation. Trails there do not end sharply. They thin, they bend, they quietly dissolve into grass and tree cover. Search teams moved methodically. They scanned meadows where a hiker might rest. They followed tree lines. They checked low spots where someone could fall out of sight. Nothing was found. No backpack, no clothing, no glasses, no scarf, not a single personal item. That absence is what makes the case so disturbing. Most missing hikers leave something behind. A dropped bottle, a footprint, a bent branch, some indication of direction. With Michael Fiser, there was nothing. No evidence of injury, no confirmed route deviation, no reason to believe he planned to leave the valley. Tiltill Valley is not vast like Yosemite Valley or Half Dome. It is open enough that movement should be visible. And yet, Fiser vanished in a way that suggests erasure rather than loss. The environment there absorbs sound quickly, Wind moves unevenly through the trees. A voice calling for help does not travel far, and once someone steps just slightly off trail, there is no obvious point where things go wrong. Time passed. Searches continued. Nothing surfaced. Michael Fiser has never been found. No remains recovered. No equipment discovered. No explanation accepted. Yosemite did not announce his disappearance. It did not leave a dramatic marker. It simply allowed him to fade into a valley designed to look harmless. Because in places like Tiltill Valley, people don't vanish suddenly. They dissolve until even the silence forgets they were there. The girl who never reached the parking lot. The trail from Andrews Bald back to Clingman's Dome is not considered dangerous. It is wide, clearly marked, and heavily traveled. That is what makes Teresa Trenny Gibson's disappearance so deeply unsettling. Trenny was 16 years old, a white female, approximately 1 meter 60 centimeters tall, weighing around 52 kilograms, with brown hair and brown eyes. On the day she vanished, she wore a brown plaid jacket, a blue and white striped sweater, blue jeans, and blue Adidas sneakers. Ordinary clothing for a school hike. Nothing that suggested risk. Nothing that suggested she wouldn't be seen again. On October 8, 1976, Trenny was visiting Great Smoky Mountains National Park as part of a high school trip from Knoxville, Tennessee. The hike to Andrews Bald was supervised, planned, and uneventful. The group completed the trail and began walking back toward the parking area at Clingman's Dome. This was the safe part. Somewhere along that return route, Trenny disappeared. Witnesses later recalled that she had been walking slightly behind the group, not separated, not lost, just lagging, close enough to still be part of the line of students moving along the trail. And then, she wasn't there anymore. When the group reached the parking lot, Trenny had not arrived. Concern escalated immediately. Teachers retraced their steps, rangers were notified. Search operations began the same day, focusing on the trail, nearby woods, and surrounding slopes. The Great Smoky Mountains are dense in a way that feels intentional. Visibility collapses just a few steps off the trail. Trees layer over each other. The ground dips and folds without warning. Fog can arrive suddenly, erasing distance and sound. Search teams worked through that environment for days. They checked ravines. They followed animal paths. They listened for any sign of movement or voice. Nothing was found. No clothing, no shoes, no indication of where Trenny left the trail. Or why. What makes the case especially terrifying is how little opportunity there was for error. She did not wander miles into the wilderness. She did not hike alone into remote terrain. She did not disappear overnight. She vanished during the final stretch of a group hike, close to cars, people, and help. As days turned into weeks, the search expanded. Volunteers and law enforcement combed larger areas of the park. Still, nothing surfaced. No remains have ever been recovered. No personal belongings discovered. No explanation confirmed. The Smoky Mountains are known for sudden weather changes and thick forest, but those factors alone do not explain how a 16-year-old girl vanished without sound, struggle, or trace, within sight of others. And that is why this case refuses to settle, because if someone can disappear there, on a marked trail, in daylight, surrounded by people, then distance is no longer the deciding factor. Trenny Gibson never made it back to the parking lot. The trail remains open. The park remains full, and every year thousands of people walk the same path, unaware that one person simply failed to arrive. In the Smoky Mountains, you don't need isolation to disappear. You only need to fall briefly out of sight. The hike that began before the park woke up. Yosemite before sunrise feels unfinished. The valley is quiet in a way it never is during the day. Trails are empty. Roads are still. The granite walls hold shadow longer than they should, and for a few hours the park belongs only to those who move through it unseen. That was the world David Paul Morrison entered. Morrison was 28 years old, a white male, approximately 1 meter 75 centimeters tall, weighing around 68 kilograms, with brown hair and brown eyes. He was last seen wearing a long-sleeved gray UCSC sweatshirt, black pants, Nike sneakers, and a black, green, and yellow waist pack. At approximately 5:30 in the morning on May 25, 1998, Morrison was seen in Yosemite Valley, beginning a hike toward Half Dome. He was alone. Half Dome is not a casual destination. Even in the late 1990s, it was understood as a demanding route. long exposed and physically unforgiving. Starting before sunrise was common for experienced hikers trying to avoid heat and crowds. Morrison's timing made sense. What didn't was what followed. When Morrison failed to return, search operations were launched along the half-dome corridor. Rangers focused on the mist trail, potential shortcuts, switchbacks, and areas where hikers sometimes misjudged distance or terrain in low light. No trace was found. No sweatshirt, no waist pack, no shoes, no indication that he ever reached the cables. What makes Morrison's disappearance especially disturbing is the hour it began. At 5:30 in the morning, Yosemite is not fully awake. Few hikers are present, fewer witnesses. If someone takes a wrong turn, slips, or leaves the trail, there may be no one close enough to notice. Granite walls block sound. Forested sections absorb movement. A fall does not always echo. Yet no confirmed fall was identified. No debris field, no belongings recovered. As the day progressed, the park filled with people. Trails grew busy. Half Dome drew crowds. But somewhere between early morning shadow and full daylight, David Paul Morrison vanished, without intersecting the thousands of eyes that would later pass through the same space. Searches continued. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, nothing surfaced. Morrison did not leave behind a trail of mistakes. He did not send a final message. He did not signal distress. He simply entered a trail before sunrise and never emerged into the day. Half Dome still draws hikers who start before dawn. They move through the same corridors. They watch the valley brighten beneath them. Few realize that one morning a man began that exact climb and was erased before the park fully noticed he was there. David Paul Morrison has never been found, because in Yosemite the most dangerous moment isn't the fall. It's the hour when the world is still asleep and no one is watching when something goes wrong. Choice 5 disappearances, no answers. If this unsettled you, leave a like. Comment which case stayed with you and where we should go next, because some places don't let people leave.